Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rowdy Book Club. My name is Shannon. My pronouns are she and her. And I am one entire human being who is also a co-host of this podcast.
Yes, and hello. Welcome. My name is Michael. I am also an entire human being. My pronouns are he, him. Hey, Shannon.
What's up?
We're recording and we're actually in the same state, but
oh my gosh, you're right.
We are not in the same location.
No, not even a little bit.
No.
But, I mean, kind of a little bit. We're both in SoCal, right?
Yeah, I'm in Palm Springs. It's very warm, and just so our listeners know, I am currently under 2 blankets to try and dampen all the sound of my nieces that are literally just running around and screaming. So, we're on a family vacay right now, super fun, but it's very warm here, and again, under 2 blankets, so just sweating a little bit. It's fun.
I'm still in the sweaty closet from last time.
Yes. Shannon, what's new? How's life?
My gosh. Life is good. I mean, as good as anything is in 2021, but it's good. We're vibing. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing great. Again, we're on vacation right now, so it's kind of nice. In order to prepare for this vacation, though, I did work just nightmare hours to try and get things finished for my clients. One of my clients finally purchased all of their hardware and cabinets for their kitchen, and that's going to be installed in a few weeks.
Nice.
Their project's in Maryland, so that's going to be super exciting. For anyone listening who doesn't know, I'm an interior designer, so that's what I do, for a job. This is what I do for fun. But okay, so a few things that I am currently obsessed with. So yes, I have 3 things that I'm really in love with this week, and I will name them in order from least obsessed to most obsessed.
Oh, so I like this. This is a good way to order things.
Yes. So the first thing is this new anime I've been watching called Kamisama Kiss. And it's about this girl. I think it was made in like 2012 or something like that. So it's this girl whose dad is, I think he gambles away all their money or something. Oh, gosh. I don't know. So she's homeless, and then her dad's just gone. So she goes to live at a shrine, and she becomes the god of this shrine. Oh. And she gets a familiar that is this silver-haired, beautiful fox man. And it's just ridiculous, but I love it.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's a big love. Also, do you listen to Billie Eilish? Are you a big Billie fan?
I feel like I listen to 1 or 2 of her songs. I don't know. I should just listen to all her songs. It's just as I come across them on the internet, I'll hear little bits of it. I'm like, ooh, that sounds cool. I should listen to that whole song. And then I'm like, wow, this song is really good. So
yeah. Well, she has a new album out, and there's a song on there called Oxytocin, and I'm obsessed with it. I just turn it on repeat at the gym, and
yes.
Here's the thing. It's the song that you need playing in the background of seducing and assassinating a villain.
Yes.
It is.
That is the only valid form of music.
Right. It is your sexy, seductive catwalk, but I'm also gonna take you out song, and it's awesome. Yeah. So that's number 2, and number 3 on my things that I'm obsessed with is Pokemon Unite.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, do you actually know about this, or do I need to explain this?
No, I know what it is in that, I watched a video essay about it that was fairly critical of it, saying that it's essentially gambling for children. And it's trying to give children a gambling addiction.
Interesting.
So,
that's very
but I think they were also maybe sort of
strange.
making an argument that, most... what are they called?
MOBAs.
Yeah, most MOBAs are kind of more or less operate in a similar way, but that Pokemon Unite is maybe more egregious, in part because it's for children, and in part because
interesting.
I guess in Pokemon, I watched the show as a kid, but I haven't played any of the games. Yeah. But I guess in the games, gambling is kind of presented in a negative light, and so it was this is hypocritical.
This is now a podcast.
Welcome to our Pokemon podcast, where I, a person who knows very little about Pokemon, talks to you all about how it's very problematic.
Yeah, I mean, interesting take. I do know, okay, so I'm a big Pokemon fan, and there's a lot of people in like the fan base that are like, oh, this game is pay to win, essentially. And
yeah, I think that's also part of
like it's really not. Like,
okay.
I do understand that, like, there are certain aspects of it that you're like, if you pay more money, you can slightly have like a few better items and stuff that could give you an advantage. And I'm like, but if you're a good player, you honestly don't need that. You know? Like hashtag get good. Like, get on my level.
It's only problematic if you're bad at video games.
Yeah, exactly. I am in the expert tier. Yeah, just achieved that. And like I haven't done any of the like pay to win stuff. So like that's why I'm like, you know what? It's really like, I do see why some people are upset about it, but it's not necessary for you to buy stuff if you want to be good.
Like, if you know what you're getting into, which I guess part of the argument is that children don't because they're children. Then you'll be fine. That makes sense. But, and I will say too, like, Pokemon Unite is definitely not the only game that operates on this whole, like, let's give children a gambling addiction model. Like, hello, Fortnite. But we don't need to get into that either. Because this is also not a podcast about video games that I haven't played. That comes later.
We're going to make a video game podcast, but not just any video game podcast. A video game podcast about games that Shannon doesn't actually know about.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Okay.
What about you?
I love that you did 3 because I also, I've been like trying to narrow it down to just 1, but now I see that I don't have to. And I also have 3 that I would like to address at this time.
Okay.
I don't know what they're ordered by. I guess from like the one I least decided on to the one I was like, I think I will do this one. How's that? So my first obsession is the latest single from Lil Nas X.
Oh my gosh.
It is called Industry Baby, and it is so good. I love it. I love Lil Nas X.
I know you do. And
Michael and I have talked about this before.
I love that you love him.
I just love him so much. And like, we've talked about this before, you and me, Michael, and Michael has told me that he loves Cate Blanchett, but not just like, oh, I love her. He's like, I want to love her as a lesbian. And that is how I feel about Lil Nas X. Like, I don't like my little inner, like, teenage gay boy who's like just coming to terms with his gayness is like Lil Nas X, like that. That person inside of me is in love with Lil Nas X. So anyway, I need to drink some water because I can tell that my mouth sounds really like
oh, this is audio hell.
Welcome to audio hell, where we talk about video games I've never played.
Oh my gosh.
And then I drink really loudly. I'm going to edit all of this out.
Perfect.
It's going to be, we'll put it in the bonus content, just like, hi, welcome to the worst ASMR of all time.
Can you actually just like cut it and then sprinkle it in through the rest of the podcast? Just like randomly, we'll just be talking
we'll use that
and then there's like horrible sounds.
We'll use that instead of like bleeping, like if we decide to swear, we'll be like, what the?
Oh my gosh.
What's he saying? Okay, I'm sorry about that. I will edit that out. What was I saying? Oh, I was talking about how much I love Lil Nas X. So I will say I didn't like it as much as Montero, his like first single from this album.
So good.
Oh my gosh, Montero. I still like all the time in my mind when I listen to it at work and I'm just like singing along to it so loud, but in my head, and I'm just like, I want to sell what you're buying. But in my mind, inside my mind. Anyway. Yeah, so I love that, but I also loved Industry Baby, especially because, 1, the music video is hilarious, but 2, he used the music video to team up with the Bail Project, which is a non-profit that is working to get people not incarcerated anymore, / paying people's bails because bail is bad and they're fighting to end cash bail. So I think that's really cool that he's doing that because he's like fighting for gay rights, but also being like incarceration is a joke. And also, it's such a joke, I'm gonna do a hilarious music video about what a joke it is. So yeah, love that. Also, it's a banger. Great song. Let's see. Okay, so that's number 1. More audio hell. Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry, I'm just like, again, the voice in my head that's like, you're gonna have to edit this later. The next one that I have is, so there is this YouTuber who I love. Her name is ContraPoints. She is a video essayist, and probably the smartest person on YouTube, which I know that doesn't sound like much of an accomplishment because we are talking about YouTube. But anyway, she is very intelligent and she does these amazing video essays, and her latest one came out last week sometime. I saw it a week ago, and it's called Envy. And she talks about envy and like what it means in our culture and why we do it. I don't know. It's just like so well structured. She wears a bunch of costumes. The music is amazing. Like, it is a presentation, and I love it. So yeah, check that out. If you listen to a lot of audiobooks or podcasts, like, you're in the target demographic. So yeah, check that out. Envy by ContraPoints. So good. Okay. Loved it. And yes, it is 2 hours long, but it's 2 hours of just, it's amazing. Okay, and all of her other videos are great. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to talk about is another podcast, actually, that I just discovered a couple weeks ago, and it is called Well, There's Your Problem, and it's a podcast about engineering disasters with slides.
Oh.
And so it's on YouTube, although I think you can listen to it as just a podcast. Like, the slides are pretty slow, but they are beneficial. No, but anyway, so this podcast is these three people who have, like, the blackest senses of humor talking about these engineering disasters, and it is just, like, I don't know, there's something about it that I guess to me is, like, really cathartic, because sometimes it's, like, especially because, like, I don't know, we just, like, know so much about all these terrible things that are happening all over the world, and you feel like you just have to be like, oh no, and, like, really upset all the time, which, like, is fair, and you should, but, like, this podcast, I feel like they've just, like, gone past the point of, like, being able to care, and it's just sort of, like, this, like, just this, like, very dark sense of humor about these terrible things that happen. And I just, like, really enjoy it. And, like, they're, like, very antagonistic, both to each other, but also to their audience. Normally I would be turned off by that, but something about it is just, like, so hilarious. Like, I think they're on their Twitter, like, their pinned tweet is like, welcome to Well, There's Your Problem podcast, the podcast that hates you back. Which just, I don't know.
Amazing.
Something about that is really speaking to me in this moment in my life. So, yeah, very, very funny. You don't learn that much about engineering. I don't feel like you have to know anything about engineering because I do not. But if you like to rubberneck at disasters and you like true crime, because I feel like true crime is kind of rubbernecking a little bit, then I think you will enjoy this podcast. So, yeah.
Okay.
So those are my 3 things that I like. Should we start talking about our book of the month?
Okay, let's talk about the book of the month. And
let's also, right now, give a big trigger warning, because I think, or content warning or whatever, because I think we're gonna talk about things.
There's so much. It's overwhelming. Hey, everyone listening, The House of Spirits is what it's called. Yes? The House of Spirits. By, oh no, I forgot her name.
Isabel Allende.
Do I even participate in this book club? I don't know.
That's fine. You don't need to know the author's name
to
know a book.
Oh, except guess what? I did do some research on her. Yes. Okay, this book, there's like so much. Shannon, you're going to do like a brief summary, right? Like,
we'll try to keep it brief.
I was going to say good luck. I don't even know where you're going to begin.
Yeah, I figured something out. We'll get to there when we get to there. But there's just a lot of adult content in this thing. It's really funny because I read this book first when I was a senior in high school as the summer reading. And
this is a weird book for someone to be like, hey, yeah.
Yeah, like this is what people in high school should read. Yeah. So, yeah. I think it was okay. Like, I don't think it was like, oh my gosh, I'm scarred by this. Obviously not. This is literally my favorite book. But yeah, there's a lot of adult content in it. A lot of sexual violence, a lot of regular violence.
Yeah.
And other things. So just, heads up.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm assuming that whatever we're going to listen to next month will be a little lighter and hopefully not have to be like, because like last month it was like, oh my gosh, this book has content. And this book is worse.
This book has even more. Yeah.
It has a lot more content. Yeah. So I'm really sorry, everyone. We'll do something light eventually, hopefully next month. But yeah, so content warning out of the way. We are reading House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. Oh, I guess this is not really a content warning as such, but I'm just gonna say, so this book is originally in Spanish. It takes place in Latin America, Chile, but I make no promises about my ability to consistently pronounce the names of the characters correctly in Spanish. I speak Spanish, or I don't really speak Spanish. It was my first language. but I don't really speak it anymore.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot that.
I know, it's so weird. I feel like my brain also forgot that. Would be nice if I could still speak Spanish, wouldn't it? Anyway, yeah, so I'm just gonna say that if that bothers you, hearing me, like, say, like, a very gringo pronunciation of Spanish words, I am sorry. I will try to not do that, but no promises. Michael, do you have anything you want to say about that? I know you speak Spanish.
Okay, so I do speak Spanish, but, like, it has been a hot minute since I, like, practice it, and I know my accent is terrible, so, you know what? Don't at me, y'all. It's gonna be bad.
Right. So that's our last disclaimer. We are ready to talk about this freaking book. We're 20 minutes into the podcast. Oh my gosh. I will cut it down, though.
Okay, so where are we starting? Do you want to start with, like, a little summary for everyone?
Sure. I will attempt that. Okay, so I figured that the best way to do this is to just kind of go through each of the important characters in this. Because it's not really a traditional, like, 3-act structure sort of story.
Yeah, no, not at all.
So I will talk about everything that happens in this book. Well, no, I won't. I will try to briefly summarize. Oh my gosh, my table is moving around. Okay, I will try to briefly summarize things as best I can. Also, obviously, spoilers at this point on. So, House of the Spirits follows 3 generations of this wealthy upper-class family in Chile, kind of throughout the 20th century, and it starts with a character, Clara, who is, I think at the beginning of the book, she's like 4 or 5 years old. She's a little kid. And so she's in the book through, like, the first, like, 2/3, I would say. And she is kind of, I would say, like, the anchor character of this family. And, you know, it kind of starts with her. Okay, so Clara, the thing about Clara that you need to know is that she is clairvoyant. She can do magic. Well, not really magic. It's more like psychic stuff. And she's also...
like a psychic.
Yeah, essentially. She can do, like, telepathy,
and she can talk to ghosts.
She can talk to ghosts. I don't think... Wait, what is telepathy? Is that the one where you talk to other people's brains? I guess she does that a little bit. She can move stuff with her mind.
She's telekinetic, and she can also sort of do some mind speech stuff.
Yeah, and also she talks to ghosts, which is kind of where the name of the book comes from. Yeah. But because of that, she's kind of like only semi like in the world. Like she's kind of like vibing and just like kind of out there. So she's just like kind of goes through life kind of just like in a dreamlike state in some ways, which is good because I think it's the only way her marriage survived even somewhat. And that's because she's married to this guy whose name is Esteban Trueba, and he is the worst.
Yep.
Ever.
The actual worst human.
Objectively. He sucks. And so you see, Esteban was originally betrothed. That's the word. He was originally betrothed to Rosa, the older sister who dies. But he's really poor at the beginning because his father squandered the family wealth because he was like an alcoholic or whatever. And so he goes and works in a mine the whole time he's engaged. And then like the minute that the mine starts like making money or whatever, he like finds gold or whatever. I don't know how mining works. That's when he learns that Rosa has died. And then he's very angry. He's a very angry character. I'm sure we will get into that later. And because of that, he kind of like turns his attention toward the family estate, which is called Tres Marias. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to like, kind of dig this place out and like, cause it had been neglected because of his father. And so he's like, I'm going to like bring this back. I'm going to bring order to it. And he does. And it becomes very successful. But the whole time he's down there, he's raping everyone. Just every single one.
Literally everyone.
Literally everyone. Including his first victim is a woman named Pancha Garcia, and she eventually gives birth to their bastard child, who's the only child named after him, who's named Esteban. And that's important. Put a little pin in that. And it's when he learns that his mother is dying that he goes home, and her dying wish is that he will get married and have legitimate children and, kind of continue the family legacy or whatever. And it's at that point that he's like, oh, okay, well, I'm just like a weirdo guy. Let me see if that family that I was originally engaged to has any other daughters. And so that's how he becomes engaged to Clara, who is the youngest daughter in this family. So there's a big age difference there, but I guess that was kind of normal back then. So then they get married. And at that point, they move into this big house on the corner that Esteban builds, which is the aforementioned House of the Spirits. And along with them, his older sister... Ferula? I don't really know how to say her name.
Yeah.
Ferula? Okay.
And she's like the coolest character.
I really like her too, yeah. She's also like definitely a lesbian in a society where that is just not a thing you can be.
I love it.
Yeah, and so she is basically a spinster, and she is super in love with Clara, which is interesting because guess who else is super in love with Clara? That's right, her brother Esteban. And so there's kind of this like rivalry that happens between the two of them for a little bit, but ultimately Esteban like walks in on Clara and Ferula essentially like spooning, and he's like, "Get out!" and he freaks out. And he throws her out, and it's at that time that she curses him that he will shrink, his bones will shrink, and then someday he will die like a dog. Which is such a good curse.
Literally, I just put that together that she was the one that did that.
What?
How? I was like, what is going on? And then I completely forgot that she cursed him. Amazing. Great. Wow.
But yeah, so then Clara wants to find her again because she's like, okay, whatever, they're having their beef, but like I still like Ferula. But she can't find her in spite of her best like clairvoyant efforts because Ferula does not want to be found. And it isn't until Ferula dies that they're sort of reunited, and Clara is able to kind of repay her for all of this kindness and love that she was shown earlier in her life. So that's a thing. Okay, at this point, Clara has Blanca, who is their first child. And she's just kind of like a chill baby for a while. They're BFFs, she and her mom. But then when she's a child, they go back to Tres Marias, and that's where she meets Pedro Oh, you guys, I'm really trying, okay? Pedro Tercero Garcia, who is related to Pancha Garcia. I remember her from earlier. And they're just like little kids at first, and they just like immediately are just like BFFs. And then as they grow older, they become lovers, and they are just kind of like star-crossed lovers. Their relationship is amazing. They were just meant for each other, which is super cool and awesome, except that Pedro Tercero is basically a peasant and also a socialist, and he hates Esteban Trueba, and he's the only one who dares to talk back to him. And so because of that, he gets into trouble and eventually gets run off of the hacienda and has to become like a fugitive, which, you know, puts a little kink in their relationship. But they still manage to see one another whenever they are both in Tres Marias. And so, one of these summers, a certain character is introduced, a French count named... This is going to be even worse, because I really don't know how to pronounce French. Jean de Sautigny? I think that's how you say it. I'm just calling him Jean from now on, or the Count. And he's like, hey guys, I want to make chinchilla farming a thing. And everyone's like, oh, a count from France, OMG. So like everyone loves him. And very early on, he sets his sights on Blanca. Not in like a romantic way, really. Honestly, I, throughout the book, get like a big gay vibe from him. Yeah, but maybe it's just because he's French. I don't know. But he seems more interested in like kind of what being married to Blanca can provide for him financially. But that said, he still likes Blanca. Like, they get along well. Like, they have a good relationship, but she's just like, under no circumstances will this ever be a thing romantically. And he's like, all right, we'll see. Because guess who knows Blanca's secret? That's right, Jean de Sautigny. And so he waits until the pivotal moment where, well, I think he's kind of like, oh, okay, I have some information on this, but shouldn't be a problem, until one night he, like, follows her and, like, sees the depth of their love for each other, and he's like, oh, this is gonna be a problem. And so it's at that point that he rats her out to her dad. And Esteban Trueba, being the worst human being of all time, loses it, and it's at that point that his... Oh, there's also a big earthquake, and Esteban gets, like, really injured. This happens before this.
He gets crushed. Okay,
all of his bones are broken.
It was at that moment so like there's an earthquake and Clara like sees Esteban get basically squished by the house, and I was like, this is it, amazing, everyone is free, the tyrant is dead. But no, he survived. I was so upset. Oh yeah, I'm sure that was very disappointing for you. Yeah. But yeah, so he gets put back together for better or worse. But during this time that he's injured is, like, when Clara is kind of the most, like, in focus with the world. And it's at that point that I think she kind of learns more about Esteban, and their relationship starts to deteriorate. Because before she's kind of just, like, vibing and just kind of like, oh, that's nice. Like, she's just kind of like, whatever. And, like, his anger doesn't really bother her. And, like,
his just whole deal doesn't really bother her. And then after this, she kind of like, I think, kind of sees the reality of what he's like, and it really hurts their relationship. And of course, she finds out about all the rapes he did. And at this point, they have this big confrontation. Well, because Blanca gets in trouble, she gets caught, and, you know, of course, Esteban's also, like, mad at Clara, because somehow it's her fault or whatever. And Clara's like, well, they're just doing for love what you did to all those peasant girls for just because you're a horny, evil person. And it's at that point that he slaps her so hard that it knocks out all of her teeth, or it's her front teeth, I guess. And it's from that time forward, Clara no longer speaks to him, and essentially their relationship is over. But they stay married because, you know.
Because it's like, at that point, it's like, what, the 40s or something? 30s, 40s?
Yeah, like the 50s, I think. I don't know. It's kind of like, it's very ambiguous about like what time it is.
But it's that point in time where you're like, oh yeah, you stay with someone even though you're unhappy because, I don't know. Yeah.
It was a different time. A worse time. And so because of that, Blanca and Pedro Tercero can't be together anymore. And Esteban decides to get his revenge on Pedro. Like, he's like, I am going to murder this kid. But no one will show him where he is because everyone loves Pedro Tercero. Oh my gosh, Pedro Tercero? Is that any better? His name is really hard for me to say. Gosh, I'm so white. Pedro Tercero. Can I just call him PT? Is that okay?
PT? Yeah, call him PT.
Or Pedro T? Okay, I'm just going to call him something.
Like Pedro the Third.
Oh yeah,
like,
Pedro.
Just get like real white.
Oh my gosh, what if I call him Pedro?
Pedro the Third.
Okay, yeah, we'll do something. But everyone loves him, and so they're all like, none of them want to help Esteban because they know that he's gonna kill him. And his father even like leaves the hacienda, and we never see him again because he's just like, oh, I don't want to be here when you find my son. Essentially, is what he says. And ultimately, the person who helps him find Pedro is his grandson from the bastard relationship, from the rape, who's Esteban Garcia II, who is his grandson. But he doesn't know that it's his grandson. And this kid is like definitely a sociopath or something. And so he's like, oh yeah, I'll show you where he is if you give me, you know, there's like a reward offered. And he's like, yeah, give me the reward. And so they go up and they find Pedro III. He's hiding out and he's asleep. And Esteban like sneaks up on him. And then he cuts off 3 of his fingers. Obviously he was trying to kill him, but then Pedro was able to escape. But not, you know, he loses 3 of his fingers. And Esteban also realizes, like, as he's, like, doing that, he's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to actually kill him. Like, he has this kind of, like, come to Jesus moment of, like, oh, wait, maybe I don't want to do this. So, yeah. But then he's still, like, just so angry about the whole situation that when they get back, his bastard grandson that he doesn't know is his grandson is like, oh, where's my reward, senor? And he's like, go die. Like, he's just no sympathy. So that is the thing. But here's the other thing. Blanca is pregnant. She's pregnant with Pedro's child. And when they find that out, well, when Esteban finds that out, he's like, okay, no, we gotta make this legitimate. And he forces Count John to marry her, and then he takes her up to the north. It's there that Blanca discovers that he is like this crazy sex fiend who does like really weird, makes like weirdo porn in a back room, and she gets so freaked out by it that she's like, nope, goodbye, and then we never see him again. So it'd be like that sometimes. And then she goes back to the big house on the hill with Clara and the rest of her family. Oh, by the way, haven't even mentioned these characters because they're like not super important yet, but Clara actually has 2 other children, twin boys, named Nicolas and Jaime. And Nicolas is like not that important. He's just kind of like a weirdo, and then he like goes to Canada. I don't know. He's not really in it that much, and we do not have time to get into him. And then Jaime is like very virtuous, and he's like kind of a tormented soul in a lot of ways. He becomes a doctor because he's just like very compassionate. He wants to help people. And so Blanca gives birth to her daughter, Alba, who is the daughter of Pedro III and Blanca. And so the last third of the book is the story of Alba, and this is when Clara passes away, like when Alba's pretty young. And this is also when the book gets like pretty overtly political in a way that like, I mean, the whole book is very political, but like, it's more just like Esteban being like, I'm a Nazi, and then Clara being like, you dumb. And so like, everyone in the family is like super lefty, except for Esteban, who's like a fascist, essentially. And also, he becomes a senator. Alba is also super lefty. She becomes like when she grows up, she's a college student and like very much like involved in like the socialism and all this stuff. The socialism, I don't know what that means. Like, she's like part of this protest, but then she has to leave because her cramps from her period are so bad, and then this girl like makes fun of her for it, and she's just like, oh, I can tell you're the bourgeoisie because you don't have periods like the proletariat do, which I was like, okay, because endometriosis is only something that happens to the rich? I don't know. That's like such a weird moment to me, but I guess she gets her redemption later, so whatever. And so here's where, like, things kind of all of this is very historically well, I don't know how historically accurate it is, but it's definitely, like, in our timeline in the real world. And it's at this point that the socialist candidate actually wins the election and becomes the president. And it's at this point that the CIA doesn't like that very much because it's the Cold War. And so they, along with the conservative people in the government, work together to overthrow the socialist government. And then there's a coup, and it becomes a military dictatorship. Isn't that so much better than socialism, Michael? Don't you think that, like, a military coup happening is so much better than people doing socialism?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so that happens, and it's also at this point that Alba gets, like, really involved with trying to help people escape the country, and, like, she has this boyfriend who is, like, a revolutionary, essentially, and, like, he's kind of like, oh, we gotta be a guerrilla warfare, it's the only way, like, the revolution. And so that kind of puts her in danger, as well as her own activities. And it's at this point that Esteban Garcia, the grandson, gets his revenge, essentially, on Esteban Trueba, the first one, because Alba is taken away by the secret police, where she is raped and tortured by him, who is, like, in the police force, and is part of this dictatorship. And it's this that is actually the impetus for the book being written, because as she's in prison in this camp, this concentration camp, essentially, like, the thing that rescues her, because she just, like, gives up her will to live, but then her grandmother, Clara, appears to her and is like, no, it's easy to die, it's hard to live, like, so you should live, Alba, and, like, encourages her to, like, write down her story, even if just in her mind. And then at this point, Esteban pulls this favor from very long ago. There's a character who shows up very occasionally throughout the book. Her name is Tránsito Soto, and she is a sex worker, and she
has a magical snake tattoo around her belly button. She has a magical
snake tattoo, and it's with the power of the magical snake tattoo that she uses her laser beam that comes out of her belly button and shoots down the prison camp and gets Alba out.
My Hero Academia.
Oh, I haven't seen that. But I was going to say, welcome to my Marvel movie.
There's a guy there that can shoot a laser out of his navel.
Oh, okay. Love that.
Anyway.
Tránsito Soto. She was originally a sex worker outside of Tres Marias when she was like a young woman. And Esteban just kind of took a liking to her because they were kind of kindred spirits in some ways. Like, she was very ambitious and, like, she was like, I'm getting out of here. And she asks him for 50 pesos or something to, like, kind of get her start. And he gives it to her just kind of like, oh, whatever. And then, like, 40, 50 years later, he goes back to her. I mean, he's seen her a couple other times, but he goes back to her and he's, like, kind of asks her to save his daughter because she is, like, has all these connections because, like, everyone in the military goes to her brothel to do their business. So because of that, she pulls all these favors and she is able to rescue Alba from this hell that she has been put through. And then Alba goes home. She's with her grandfather when he dies. And then she starts writing the story. And then you realize at the end, like, the last sentence is the first sentence of the book, which I think is really cool. That's and really cool. She's writing out this story as a way to process her trauma of what happened to her in the concentration camp. And that is my summary of The House of the Spirits.
Woo. Yeah, like, take a lap, like, get some water.
Yeah, seriously, intermission. I'm gonna adjust my chair again and make a bunch of noises. Michael, you should, like, put your head out of the blankets for a sec.
I have put my legs out, so my legs are breathing while the rest of me is sweating.
That works.
So if you were to walk in, I am laying on the floor like a blob that just has these, like, 2 legs sticking out of it.
I love that image so much.
Also, I'm wearing a tiny little swimsuit, so if you were to walk in, it does look like I'm naked because most of my legs are completely bare.
Great.
So it looks like
you're just like a little
naked
ghost
on the floor, covering myself and my computer by a blanket, like a little pervert.
That is That's gonna be the cover of that's our new icon for this podcast.
Get rowdy.
Okay, Michael, do you want to tell us a little bit about the author?
Okay, so...
And whatever else you researched? I don't know what all you did.
Listen, I only did a little bit of research because just like this book, there's a lot going on in this woman's life.
Oh, yeah.
She seems like wicked cool. Like, this month was so crazy. I didn't have time to devote to this research as much as I should and would like to have. But from a quick cursory Wikipedia search, so she was actually born in Peru, and she kind of like hopped around a few places, ends up in the United States. That's where I believe she is now, and she actually got her United States citizenship in 1993, so she's been a citizen of the United States for a hot minute. The House of Spirits was actually written in 1982, which I feel like is kind of helpful information as you're listening to it.
Yes.
To think like, okay, what's happening in the 80s, like late 70s, early 80s, that is kind of like her mindset to write these things, which just saying that, hopping back to the like French Count that you were like, I kind of get gay vibes from him. I did too. And then I thought, okay, think of someone in the early 80s writing in a gay character. Like, how would they write a gay character? And like, and obviously I am not this author. I'm just putting, my own spin on things. So this could be completely inaccurate, but like, in that time period, you see a lot of like, oh, this person is gay. We're not going to say it, but we are going to tell you that they wear really nice shoes and really nice clothes, and they're like really finicky about like their appearance, and that's how you know that they're gay, So little things like that, like knowing that the time period that this book was written, you're like, ooh, like I feel like I understand this character more. I feel like I understand her point of view a little bit more. Anyway, so again, there's a lot of stuff in her life. Her father was cousin to Salvador Allende, who was the president of Chile from 1970 to 1973. So her dad's cousin was overthrown in a coup, and then her mother and her stepfather were like almost assassinated, and she was actually like receiving death threats and stuff like that, and she ended up fleeing to Venezuela. But it says that she was like arranging safe passage for people on quote unquote wanted lists. So she was like, as you were reading things about her, you're like, ooh, I see a lot of that in the characters in this book. So
yeah, this book is like very autobiographical. Like, I don't think it's like perfectly so, but like, yeah, there's a lot of like her life that is definitely in this.
Yeah, and super cool. She also like is an author known for like writing in the genre called magical realism. And let me tell you, I know what this is because of Jane the Virgin.
Oh my gosh.
Have you seen Jane the Virgin?
I love that. No, I have not seen that, but I love that is your source of knowledge for magical realism.
Oh, yes, 1000%. Because, so, Jane is an author, and she writes in magical realism. And so, in Jane the Virgin, like, there's a narrator to the entire story, and, like, the genre of magical realism, for anyone who hasn't seen Jane the Virgin and doesn't know what it is, it's not like fantasy. Like, it's not like Harry Potter. There's not wizards and dragons and stuff like that. But
sadly,
it's
there is no serpent laser belly button.
There is no actual laser belly button. We tricked you. But it's like realism in the sense that you're like, oh yeah, this is just kind of like a normal story about normal people, but the magical part comes from like this extreme hyperbole of like, just, you're like, okay, this thing wouldn't really happen in real life, like this thing might happen in real life, but it's just like blown out of proportion. And like weird stuff happens, like the Rosa was like a mermaid. Like, I didn't even really understand that she like was a mermaid.
She's just an anime protagonist.
She was an anime protagonist because she had green hair and yellow eyes and whatever. And then there's like this dog.
Too anime for this world.
then there's this dog that Clara had that was, like, murdered during her, like, engagement party or something like that. And they keep saying, they're like, oh, the dog is as big as a horse and it has alligator talons. And, like, that's the magical realism that, like, everything is just, like, super, like, exaggerated.
Also, so, like, people being psychic and stuff like that. And it's just sort of, accepted. Like, no one's like, that's not real. There's no psychics. It's just like, yeah, she's clairvoyant. She's going to predict when the earthquakes happen. Like, this is just an accepted reality of our lives. Yeah.
Anyway, so that is what Isabel Allende is, like, known for. So that's what this book is. And that's kind of my little tidbit about the author. She seems way cool. Go read more about her because there's a lot that I didn't even sort of touch. So, do you want to talk about any particular parts or things that just fired you up or things that you want to get rowdy about? Because...
Oh my gosh. So many things to get rowdy about. Yes, there are lots of things to talk about. I will say, like, it's funny because, like, as you were reading it, you, like, messaged me and you were like, I see why you like this book. It's because there's lesbians in it. And that was funny because when my husband read the book, he was like, I see why you like this book. It's so political.
Oh.
And or like he's like, it's so like leftist. And like I will say to both you and him, I'm like, yes, I do like this book for those reasons. But actually, the reason why I love this book is not so much that, I mean, it is all those things, but like what like drew me into it the first time when I read it for high school summer reading was, well, one, it's just like I really enjoy the style, but there's something about the way that it's like structured that I really enjoy. I love the voice. I don't know, I feel like, I don't know why, but like omniscient narrators are like not very popular, I feel like. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they are. I feel like I don't encounter them very often, but I love omniscient narrators, and I love, throughout the book, it's like, the book almost like spoils itself. And I really love that. I feel like you don't see that very often. Maybe, again, because you don't have, like, omniscient narrators who are like, that'll be important later. Because, like, usually it's, like, the character's just in their own head and they don't know if it's going to be important later. And so I just love, like, this whole, like, kind of frame. And then especially, like, at the end, you discover that the sort of, like, omniscient narrator is actually Alba the whole time. And that, like...
Which, like, makes sense why she knew everything that happened.
Right. That she's like, oh, let me recount to you what happens. Mm-hmm. And I just love that. And I think that is kind of a thing in... Well, I know it's a thing in her writing. I know it's also a thing in the writing of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude. That's, I think, his, like, most well-known book. And actually, House of the Spirits is very much, like, inspired by that. But in both of their writing, there is this just sort of, like, yeah, anyway, this happened. And also, when this character was about to be murdered, he thought back on this and realized it was the happiest moment of his life. And you're like, wait, he's gonna be murdered? What?
Yeah.
And it's like, but we'll get there when we get there. Anyway, they walk down the street and you're like, okay. And then, like, by the time so it's like, it's kind of like hanging over your head of like, oh, this guy's gonna die. He's gonna get murdered. But then you're also like, oh, but this is what's happening right now. And then by the time you get to them being murdered, you're like, oh no, I knew this was coming because they told me it was coming. So I just really like that. Just like the way in which it's written.
It's very like the beginning of Tangled, where when Flynn Rider is like, this is a story about the day I die. Yes. And you're like, excuse me, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Yes.
And she does that throughout the book. She'll just like slip in a tidbit and you're like, can we go back to that? And then she's like, moving on. What?
Yes. Is there something you want to talk about now? I'm passing it on to you, Michael.
Okay, so I want to get rowdy about how stupid everyone is that they don't ever listen to Clara. Like,
oh my gosh.
Like they know that she can like predict the future and like all this stuff, like so many things from the time she's a little girl. She will predict stuff that always comes true, and she will straight up, like, she predicted Rosa's death. She was like, oh, someone in the family is going to accidentally die. And they were just like, and no one listened to her. What? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, there's about to be an earthquake. And they're like, actually, there probably isn't. And I'm like, oh, she keeps predicting stuff. Why are you not listening to her? It is infuriating. It makes me so angry. And I'm like, what? Is it because she's a woman? Like, I don't, like... Is it because everyone else is just stupid? Like, they know, like, there is evidence all around everyone about how she can predict the future, and people just ignore her.
Well, yeah, and that's also, like, interesting because it's not even, like, they're, like, in the world, it's like, yeah, we know this is true, we accept this is true. It's not like they're like, oh, you crackpot psych is being able to see the future isn't real. Like, they all accept it as true, but then she's like, there's going to be a big earthquake, and then everyone forgets.
They just ignore it. Anyway, also, I just, like, absolutely hate Esteban. Like last month we talked about, what's the husband's name from
Carter?
Vampire. Oh, yeah, Carter. He was just a douchebag, but, like, Esteban, like, actively raped, like, an entire, like, countryside of women.
Yeah.
And there's even at one point, like, when he is, like, older and married to Clara, and she, like, stops talking to him, and they, like, obviously they're not having sex at this point, and he's like, to get back at her, I tried to rape again. And he's like, but I just couldn't do it because I wasn't strong enough to hold the women down. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, what? Anyway.
Yeah.
I wanted him to just repeatedly get hit by cars. And the funniest thing, reading this book, because, okay, it is, like, it's kind of hard for me to listen to just because it is so, like, I had no, like, direction in where we were going with this book. You know, like, I like to have, like, kind of a roadmap of where we're going. And it was just, like, very wandering. Like, we would just kind of, like, wander from topic to topic and person to person. And it follows, like, so many, like, different characters that I was just like, ooh, this is, like, where are we going?
Yeah. That's true.
Well, speaking of where are we going, where am I going with this sentence? I
don't know. You're talking about Esteban and how much you hate him. And then you were I don't know what's happening in this book.
Yeah, so I'm reading this book, and I'm like, I don't know where we're going, and then it just starts talking about this, like, horrible rapist man, and then Shannon's like, this is my absolute favorite book, and I was like, why? Like, I'm lost, and the only, like, prominent character is just, like, the most horrible person, but then, like, you get into, like, Clara becomes... She's not, like, a huge focal point at the beginning, but then she becomes, like, a big character, and she's, like, super cool. And then Esteban's sister is, like, more present, and then she has lesbian vibes, and that whole thing was amazing. And then from there, like, I was like, oh, okay, I see why Shannon likes this, but it took me a good chunk of time before I was able to see why you like this. But...
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I totally agree. Esteban is terrible. And, like, not even just because of the rapes. He is also just straight up a fascist. Like, he was rooting for the Nazis in World War II. Yeah. And, like, very homophobic, of course. And, like, just, like, very... I mean, like, all of his politics are, like, very repugnant to me. And just, like, this attitude of, like, oh, well, I put myself up in my own bootstraps. And I can do whatever I want. And, like, some of us are just better than other people. Which is, like... Just, like, I don't.
Yeah, it's like, literally, there's nothing redeemable about him. It's not like, oh, he's this horrible person, but he does this cool thing. It's like, everything about him is terrible. All of his... Everything he does, everything he agrees with, everything he likes, just terrible.
Yes. I will say, though, and here's where I'm gonna, like, come back around on it. / this was what I mentioned to you when I was like, I think the reason, or part of the reason why I like this book is part of the reason why you like Name of the Wind. Mm-hmm. Which is that, like, at least in my understanding of part of why you like it is that, I'm gonna say his name wrong. Kvothe? Yeah. Kvothe? Like, I don't really like him. We don't need to get super into this, but I don't really like the books. But, like, why you like him is that he starts out and he's, like, really cocky and really good at everything. He's kind of a Mary Sue, essentially. Mm-hmm. But what you like about that is there's this contrast with him being like, I'm so good at everything and I always, like, end up winning and, like, people try to beat me, but I just always get the last word and I win. And there's that, and it's contrasted with how he's just kind of like this loser bartender? Bartender, whatever. Yeah. Pub man? I don't know, fantasy bartender?
Like an innkeeper.
Yeah, sure, innkeeper in, like, just this middle of nowhere, podunk, rural town, and it's kind of like, oh, how the mighty have fallen. And that's, like, part of what you like about it. Yeah. And I will say, in a similar vein, I can't personally bring myself to hate Esteban Trueba the same way that, like, you do, / probably most people do, because everything in his life that makes him a bad person also makes him miserable.
Yeah.
Like, he does not, like that was what was hard for me in Southern Vampires Ladies Club book.
Yeah.
Is that Carter could just do whatever, and there was, like, never really any consequences because that's the way things were set up in society. And, like, yeah, she gets divorced from him, and I'm sure that was hard for him, but, like, I don't know. He just, like, I feel like he never really faced any consequences for him being, like, the worst husband of all time. But, like, Esteban, just throughout the book, he's angry, he's terrible to everyone, and it just makes him miserable. It doesn't make him happy. It doesn't, like, he faces consequences for his terrible actions, and, like, yeah, he doesn't really change, except for maybe, I think at the end he kind of softens. But the thing about it is that there is kind of this, like, symmetry of, like, he goes around and rapes all of these women, and the fruit of that is that eventually his granddaughter, the only thing that he really cares about at that point in his life, like, it's worse what happens to her having happened to her than, like, him having had some sort of retribution, because, like, you know, when someone you love is hurt, that hurts you more than if you were hurt in a lot of ways. And so, like, there is sort of this, like, karmic justice, even though, like, Alba is innocent in this. Like, she didn't rape anyone, of course. But, like, like, this is the worst thing that could have possibly happened to him. That, like, his own bastard grandson, like, literally the fruit of his loins from this rape that he commits is what ends up destroying him, essentially. Like, yes, Alba is able to escape, and that's really good, like, for her. But, like, for him, like, he is broken by this, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing with that, too, is that Clara, like, all he wants is to possess her, and he's like, I wanted her to love me and only think about me ever, and he never gets that. Clara is just not that kind of person. And at the end, their relationship, they are so far apart from each other, like, if he would not be the way that he was, like, if he would just be kinder, if he would just deal with his anger, like, he didn't have to be this way, but he, you know, chose to be this way. And I guess finally, my last thing that I will say about Esteban Trueba, of why I can't hate him, is that I am also a deeply, deeply angry person. And there's, like, part of that, when I see him, I see that in myself. And I don't know what to do with that. Like, obviously, I'm not doing the things that he did with that anger, but, like, there's just something about, like, oftentimes, like, he flies off the rails and he does this stuff, and then immediately afterwards he's like, oh, I took it too far, I shouldn't have done that. And I guess that, to me, is really relatable, because there have been many times where I have gotten so angry and done things that, like, immediately I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, that was too much. And so I guess that sort of humanized him to me, because I was like, oh, yeah, I have been in that headspace. Like, I have not done these things. I hope I never do these things. And I hope I don't become like you. But there is a part of you that is like a part of me. And I guess, like, that part of me kind of, like, is this like a yoga thing? Like, the goodness in me acknowledges the goodness in you. It's like the anger and evil in me acknowledges the evil in you. I guess I have that kind of moment with him. So that's why, like, I agree that he is a terrible, terrible person. But I guess like I said, I can't, like, bring myself to fully hate him, because, like, there's part of me that's like, oh, like, in another universe, that could be me.
Okay, I get that.
Let's hand it back to you. Is there anything else? Is there more that you want to say?
Anything else that I want to get rowdy about?
Yeah, please.
You know what? There's a lot. Okay, but, like,
this book is so thick. We shouldn't have done this book. It's like 500 pages, and there's so much happening in all of it.
Oh yeah, we're supposed to rate it. So let me give it my rating. There is also there's one more thing that I want to get rowdy about, because it was just, like, the weirdest thing.
Please.
Okay, I wrote it down. I was on my way to work listening to this, and I had to pull up some notes and write this down, because it was just so weird. I was like, we have to talk about this. Okay, so Rosa, Clara's older sister, who was a mermaid, still unclear. I don't know this author personally. There were a few things that so for people listening to this, I served an LDS mission in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and people in Buenos Aires are a lot lighter skinned than some other Latinos, and they, like, take pride in that, and they would, like, it's not uncommon for them to, like, refer to, like, someone in the family who's darker skinned than someone else as, like, the little black one. Like, it is very common to to make that distinction of like, oh, that person is darker than me, or like they would, for some reason, a lot of Argentine people are like super racist against Bolivians. They would call them like, oh, those indios. And like you see that written in this book, like, oh, those indios, like those, like the peasant people that are in the countryside. And it seems like very racist. And I'm not saying that she's writing this and she's being racist, but when she writes certain characters, like she writes Rosa, and I quote, she was born an angel. And as soon as I heard born an angel, I was like, don't you dare say that she had white skin.
Oh no.
And they immediately say she had white skin. It was so pale, and she had green hair and yellow eyes, and like all of these are very like not typical like Latin features. And I was just like, why are we, and this could be like internalized racism, like, oh, I am just taught by society that white skin is better. But I had a problem with that. Fair.
That is fair. And actually, I'm glad you said that, because I also have things to say in that vein.
Yeah.
If you're done, I don't want to cut you off.
No, now I'm getting to the weird part. Okay.
Oh, this isn't the weird part?
No, that was just something
that was the context?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, okay, so Rosa, she dies, and then is it like the priest or something? Like does her autopsy?
Oh, no, it's the doctor and his assistant.
Okay, yeah. So a doctor and his assistant like do her autopsy or whatever. And the assistant can go straight to hell because it talks about how he is like looking at her and he's like, oh, it's such a shame that she's dead because she's so beautiful. He didn't know anything about her. He was just literally this object, this like dead woman. He's like, oh, I know nothing about you except the way that you look. Like and he was like weirdly fixated by the way she looks. Also, Rosa's own dad, like when she dies, it talks about how he mourns, and what he says is he's like, oh, remember how she would scare away the butterflies because she was so beautiful? It doesn't talk about anything else about her other than how pretty she is. And like that, she was literally just an object to everyone. Anyway, at one point, Clara is like looking through the window at the assistant, and he's like, after doing the autopsy on her body. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Oh, as soon as you were like the assistant, or like, I don't know exactly what you said, but yeah, I was just like, I know exactly what part you're talking about. Because that part, like, every time I read it, but that first time that I read it, I was like, what is happening?
Okay, so yeah, now let me get into it. So Clara, imagine being Clara, who's like, what, 8 at this point in time?
Yeah, like 6 or 7.
Yeah, she's like super young, and she sees these 2 men do an autopsy on her sister, so that's traumatizing in and of itself. And then this creepy assistant like sews her up, and then he like sponge bathes her and like cleans all the blood off of her, and then it says he kisses her mouth, her neck, her breasts, and like as I'm reading this, I'm like, stop it. Mm-hmm. And then it says he kisses her between the legs. I'm sorry, sir, go to hell. What is wrong with you? No, nope, return it and get out of here. Yes. Anyway, so that was just a weird thing in the book. Yep. And it's just one of those things that you're like, there was this weird creepy character that did this weird creepy thing, and that's the end of that. Yes. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that part is definitely like, there are certain parts of this book, like I said, I love this book, and most of it, like when I get to parts, I'm like, oh yeah, this part of the book, I like this part of the book. Like even the parts where like bad things happen, like I still like find enjoyment from them. But then there are parts of the book where I'm like, oh no, it's this part. And that part with the autopsy is definitely one where every time I'm just like, ah! And also I will say like, I have more thoughts, but put a pin in that. I want to go back to what you were saying about like some of the racist language in it. And I will say like there are certain things that I'm like, yes, one, this book was written in 1982, so like I want to give some leeway. The other thing, this book is written originally in Spanish, so like also some of there's like could be, lost in translation or whatever. And then 3, I think what she's trying to do is to kind of like speak in the language of the time. So like if it's like the 1915s or whatever, like everyone's like, oh yeah, white skin, like amazing and good. Like, and I think that's like part of it of just like kind of like being like going into that time. But like I will say like some of the language like still like even with that I'm still kind of like I don't love that you're like calling people with Down syndrome what they call them in the book. I don't even want to repeat it. Yeah, I don't love it. I think it maybe was for a reason, but I just don't love it. It makes me kind of uncomfortable. That part of it I don't like. Yeah. And that would be one of my like criticisms. Yeah, but what I was gonna say is the other thing is like the last third of the book, like when it's like really getting into like the coup and like all this stuff, like, and also I know what's coming up with like what happens to Alba, like I am just like, like, and I will say like this time around reading it, because the last time I read it was when I was in college. Like Trump was president, but it was before like the literal coup that happened on January 6th. Yeah. And so, like, all of that hit so different this time. Like, every time I've read it, I've always been like, oh, like, like, that whole part with the coup, like, it's really, like, scary. And I'm like, and, like, in the past, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that'd be so crazy if that happened to me, or, like, if that happened in my country. But, like, you know, it's kind of like, oh, we're American, like, I don't think that that would happen. But now that, like, it basically did, I mean, obviously it wasn't successful, and it wasn't the military. It was just a bunch of, like, crazy right-wing nut jobs who, like, we don't need to get into that. But, like, having been that close to something like what happens in the book happening here, like, that was really scary to me reading it this time. I was, like, it just, like, hit me really different of, like, yeah, like, that could happen here. Like, in a way that, like, I was always like, oh, yeah, anything could happen. Like, that could happen. But, like, the reality of it just, like, sunk in a lot more for me. And it was, like, I don't know. I guess I just, like, put myself in in the shoes of these characters a lot more because I was like, we could have done that. Yeah. Also the fact that, like, the U.S. basically orchestrated that coup. Yeah. Cool. I feel like I had one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, and then we can rate the book. I want to say also part of the reason why I love this book is that I definitely read Clara as Aroace, which, if you aren't familiar with that terminology, it's aromantic asexual. Because, like, she's just kind of, like, vibing. I don't know, but she's, like, she's never, like, in love with anyone. Like, she doesn't love her husband. Like, she just kind of treats him as the way she treats everyone else in her life. I mean, at first. And, like, when Ferula is, like, all kind of in love with her, like, I feel like she still just kind of loves her the same way she loves everyone. And I feel like, to me at least, she seems ace. Yeah. So, yeah. And I don't know if that's really what the author intended, but, like, that's definitely, like, my reading of it. And so I, like, even if that wasn't the intention, I feel kind of represented by it. So, yeah, I just think that's cool. And it kind of helps balance out that, like, everyone else in the book is, like, very horny. Yes. Yes. Any other rowdiness?
No, I think that mostly covers it. Cool. I want to rate it. I'm trying to think of what rating I'm going to give this. So, I'm going to give this, like, I'm going to give it the Meandering Award. Because it feels very, as I mentioned, like we get to the end, but it takes us a long time. A very long time. As you're reading it, it does feel kind of meandering, like you're just kind of like weaving back and forth through this story, and you're just kind of watching it all unfold. So that's why I'm giving it this award.
Love that. I'm gonna give this book a rating of 9 out of 10 McMansions full of ghosts. Because that's essentially where they live.
They do live in a McMansion, yes.
Yes. And it's spooky.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, it's not really spooky, actually. Like, House of the Spirits,
there are actually, like, no spooky spirits.
Yeah, all the spirits are just kind of, like, chilling.
They're just there. Maybe aliens, who knows?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's true. Clara is a UFO truther.
Okay, should we announce next month's?
I'm very excited to learn what this book is because I don't even know what it is.
We don't even. Yeah, it's such a surprise. Okay, so I promise I will do some research and I will find a very good romance novel that we will read in the future. This month is not that month, but so I don't know how this book is. I've never had someone recommend this to me, so it might be terrible, and I'm
excited for that. It's a good contrast to, like, me being like, this is my favorite book ever.
Yeah. So this book is called The Once and Future Witches.
Ooh.
By Alix E. Harrow, or Harrow.
So that will be our next month's reading. Remember, of course, that fascism is a loser ideology, and we will see you next month. Goodbye!
Bye!